Implicit bias is, I mean, you take this test where that occurs on the order of milliseconds, where you're asked to associate words like good or bad with black or white faces. You can do this with anything. You can do it with apples and oranges, and how fast you associate one thing with a positive word versus a negative word, you get a score that sort of spits out the degree to which you're implicitly biased against one or the other. And I mean, the obvious thing to notice about these tests is that there's a reason they're done on the order of milliseconds. It's because when you expand the range to seconds, you can't find any bias. I mean, they wouldn't have to do it in terms of milliseconds quicker if they could find that you were biased on the order of seconds and minutes. At this point, it's mainstream, I think. It's a mainstream reading of the psychological literature that implicit bias does not predict real-world bias at all. And this has been admitted by one of the founders of the implicit bias test. Yes. That is, knowing someone's implicit bias score doesn't give you any predictive power as to whether they will discriminate in real life. So, I mean, there's a lot of hype around this, but at this point, it's just, it's been totally discredited as a method for predicting real-world bias. In a country of 350 million people, a given something that has a 1 in a billion chance of happening to you on any given day will happen to it'll happen to someone like 3 times a week or twice a week, right? If you just look at the probability of it, a 1 in a billion chance in a country that's a third of a billion will happen to someone somewhere every third day. So as long as there's someone with an iPhone there to film it, or a journalist who's incentivized enough to publish it, it can seem like there's an epidemic of some issue when in fact there's a 1 in a billion chance of it happening to you on any given day. Say it just is the case that you have a 1 in a billion chance of getting struck by lightning every day. Then with those odds, someone will get struck by lightning in the US once every 3 days, because we have that many people. So it can seem like there is that there's an outbreak of this thing happening, when in fact it's actually very rare. So, I mean, another way of looking at this is that a big problem with the way people look at racist incidents, let's just assume the Starbucks was a racist incident. It's actually unclear that it was, but let's just assume for the sake of argument. People look at racist incidents like this with a kind of the mindset of it like a disease. So think of something like smallpox. Smallpox used to be a huge issue, and it's the kind of issue where it's not enough to get rid of 90% of it or 99% of it. It really is useful to find the last person in the world with smallpox and make them not contagious, and just you never hit diminishing returns fighting something like smallpox. It really is worth it to get down to the last case. But then think of a problem like homicide, for example. Like the homicide rate in New York used to be 10 times as high as it is now in the 90s. We've gotten rid of 90% of the problem, but it's still 200 or 300 people in a city of 8 million get killed every year. What would it take to get the homicide rate in New York down to 0, right? It could be done, but it would require a completely totalitarian top-down solution, putting cameras inside of everyone's houses and marshaling the police to do nothing else but try to prevent homicide. It would be unlivable. It would not be worth it. You would hit diminishing returns trying to get the homicide rate literally down to 0. So many people view racist incidents as a kind of smallpox scenario, where it is worth it to continue fighting it down to the very last instance. Where I view it as much more like the homicide problem, where you can reduce racism and racist incidents 90%, and it could be the case that you just hit diminishing returns at a certain point, because in a country of 350 million, there will always be enough bad people to justify a few racist instances that don't indicate a trend or an epidemic. And we just have to, it's interesting that we just don't have these intuitions about homicide. Like no one is scandalized by the fact that there were 200 homicides, 200 or 300 homicides in New York last year. But if there are a couple racist incidents at a Starbucks, it's a national scandal. No, I mean, this doesn't make any sense. They're treating it like a disease outbreak, right? Which is, in my view, the definition of a moral panic.